Silent CEO pretended to be a janitor for a week. Only one trainee girl treated him like a human. Among dozens of trainees desperate to impress, only one young woman, Maya Bennett, stopped beside him and asked, "Do you need a hand with that?" She had no idea she had just shown kindness to the most powerful man in the company. Because no one inside the 47-story tower knew the quiet janitor mopping the floors every morning was actually Evan Cole, the cold, silent CEO they had only ever seen on financial news. For 1 week he kept his head down. He picked up discarded coffee cups. He listened to casual insults. He watched polished smiles from people who loved talking about company culture while treating invisible workers like robots. And Evan had no idea that this intern from the small town was about to change his life forever, and would force him to confront the most painful truth. His company wasn't short on talent. It was short on people who still knew how to see another human being. No one inside the 47-story headquarters of Cole and Hartwell Logistics knew that Evan Cole had stopped being their CEO that Monday morning. At least not in any way they could recognize. At 8:05 a.m., Evan sat at the head of the executive conference table, looking past the glass walls toward downtown Chicago. The city below was already awake, trucks rolling through narrow streets, trains crossing steel bridges, the lake sitting gray beneath a hard morning sky. Behind him, Claire Donovan clicked to the next slide. "Employee satisfaction is up 12%, she said smoothly. "Training engagement is strong. The new trainee cohort has responded extremely well to our leadership pipeline." On the screen, bright blue bars climbed upward. Respect, inclusion, and accountability are the top 3 words used in feedback forms. Several executives nodded. Evan did not. He was 37, silent by reputation, feared by people who mistook stillness for anger. Most employees only knew him from financial news interviews and the framed portrait in the lobby. Cold, brilliant, untouchable. But that morning, beneath Claire's glossy report, lay a folded letter written in uneven blue ink. It was from Walter Simmons. Walt was 63, a janitor who had worked in the building for 18 years. He was out on medical leave after knee surgery, but before leaving, he had written directly to Evan, "Mr. Cole, I don't think you know what your company feels like from the bottom floor." The letter described custodial staff being ignored, security guards being mocked, warehouse workers blamed for software failures, and complaints disappearing inside human resources. The last sentence had followed Evan all weekend. "Sir, this place still runs, but I don't know if it still has a heart." Claire ended her presentation with a calm smile. "As you can see, the culture is healthy. Isolated concerns exist, of course, but nothing systemic." Evan looked up. "Did Walter Simmons file a complaint before his leave?" Claire's smile tightened just slightly. "Yes, we reviewed it, and it did not require escalation. Walt has been under physical stress. Sometimes long-term employees struggle with change." Evan said nothing. That was what unsettled people most about him. He rarely raised his voice. He simply became quieter. That night, after the executive floors emptied, Evan took the service elevator to the basement. In a narrow supply room, a gray uniform hung from a hook. A temporary badge was clipped to the pocket. "Ed Miller," Vasilis Evan removed his watch and placed it in his coat pocket. By Monday morning, Evan Cole had disappeared from the top floor. Ed Miller arrived at 6:40 a.m., pushing a yellow mop bucket. No one looked at him twice. On the trainee floor, 18 new hires gathered outside a glass-walled classroom, carrying laptops, coffee, and nervous ambition. Evan lowered his head and began mopping near the coffee station. A young man in a navy blazer stepped around the wet floor sign without slowing. "Careful," Evan said quietly. The trainee glanced back, irritated. "Then maybe don't mop where people walk." A few others laughed. Later, a woman from marketing placed an empty cup on Evan's cleaning cart, though a trash can stood 3 feet away. "Thanks," she said, already walking off. By mid-morning, Evan understood what Walt meant. It was not one dramatic act of cruelty. It was 100 small permissions. A door left to close in someone's face. A spill abandoned for someone else. A name ignored because a uniform had replaced it. Then a chair scraped across the floor. Evan turned. A young woman was moving it out of his path before he reached the corner. She wore a simple cream blouse, black slacks, and shoes that looked new but not expensive. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't want you to have to mop around it." Evan looked at her name tag. "Maya Bennett, Trainee Program, Ohio." "That's all right," he said. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you need a hand with the others?" It was a small question, ordinary, human. Inside the classroom, other trainees were laughing too loudly at Claire's jokes, standing straighter whenever a manager passed. But Maya had stopped for a janitor no one else bothered to see. "No," Evan said softly. "I've got it." Maya smiled. "Well, thank you for keeping this place from falling apart." Then Claire called everyone inside. Evan stayed in the hallway, one hand resting on the mop handle, watching Maya take her seat behind the glass. For the first time in years, he wondered if the most important meeting in the building was not happening upstairs. Maybe it was happening right here, beside the wet floor sign, where only one person had remembered he was human. Maya Bennett had spent the night before orientation ironing the same cream blouse twice. It was not expensive. Nothing in her suitcase was. She had packed 2 pairs of slacks, 3 blouses, 1 blazer from a clearance rack, and a pair of black flats that pinched her heels but looked professional enough if no one looked too closely. Her apartment in Chicago was temporary, small, and too close to the train tracks. Every time the floor trembled, she reminded herself it was still better than going back to Ohio with another unfinished plan. She needed this job, not wanted, needed. There were student loans waiting in her inbox. There was her mother's prescription bill taped to the fridge back home. There was her younger brother, Caleb, who never asked for help, but had quietly started picking up extra shifts at the garage after their mother's stroke. Maya had taken a year off school to help at home. People called it responsible, but responsibility did not look impressive on a resume. It looked like a gap. So when Cole and Hartwell Logistics accepted her into its trainee program, she told herself this was her chance to prove she belonged somewhere bigger than the small Ohio town where everyone knew what your parents owed and what you had failed to finish. Inside the training room, belonging seemed to come naturally to Tyler Reed. He arrived 5 minutes early, wearing a navy suit that looked tailored and a smile that looked practiced. By 9:15, everyone knew he had graduated from Northwestern, interned in New York, and once had coffee with someone who now worked in private equity. He did not brag exactly. That was what made it effective. He dropped achievements gently, as if embarrassed by them, and let other people pick them up. Claire Donovan noticed him immediately. "Excellent point, Tyler," she said after his first answer. Tyler smiled, modest and bright. "Just building on what you said." Maya wrote that sentence down, then crossed it out. She could analyze warehouse delays, compare route efficiency, and spot flaws in a workflow after 10 minutes of watching people move. What she could not do was make powerful people feel clever while pretending the idea had been theirs all along. During the first break, the trainees gathered near the coffee station. Maya stood a little apart, stirring powdered creamer into coffee that tasted burnt. Tyler leaned against the counter with 2 other trainees, Brandon and Elise. "So," Brandon said, nodding toward the hallway, "is that the guy from facilities assigned to us all week?" Evan, still wearing the name badge that said Ed Miller, was wiping coffee rings from a nearby table. Tyler glanced at him. "Looks like it. Good, we're important enough to get our own janitor." Elise laughed. Maya looked down at her cup. It would have been easy to say nothing. Everyone else did. Tyler picked up a used stir stick and tossed it toward the trash. It missed, landing beside Evan's cart. "Oops," Tyler said. "Ed's got it." Evan bent down without a word. Maya stepped forward first, picked up the stir stick, and dropped it into the trash. Tyler watched her. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Maya said. "That's kind of his job." Maya met his eyes. Making the mess wasn't. The little circle went quiet, not dramatically, not enough to become a scene, just enough for the air to change. Tyler gave a short laugh. "Ohio, right?" Maya felt the word hit the way he intended it to. Small, unsophisticated, out of place. "Yes," she said. He smiled. "That explains the manners." For a second, Maya almost smiled back. That was what people did when they wanted to survive a room. They softened insults by pretending not to understand them. Instead, she took her coffee and returned to her seat. Across the hall, Evan kept wiping the table, but his eyes followed her. The morning continued with team exercises, leadership assessments, and Claire's polished speeches about culture. At Cole and Hartwell, Claire said, "We value confidence. We value initiative. We value people who know how to step forward." Maya wondered if there was room for people who stepped aside so someone else would not have to bend down. At lunch, boxed meals were brought into the training room. The trainees ate quickly while trying to sound impressive between bites. When they finished, most left their containers scattered across the tables. Tyler stacked his empty salad bowl on Evan's cleaning cart as he passed. "Thanks, Ed," he said without looking at him. Maya stood, gathered her own trash, then quietly picked up 2 containers left by others. Brandon smirked. "Careful, Maya. Keep that up and they'll promote you to facilities." A few people laughed. Maya's face warmed, but she kept walking to the trash can. She did not make a speech. She did not shame anyone. She simply did the thing that should have been normal. That was what unsettled Evan most. She was not performing kindness. She was paying for it. By the end of the day, he had seen the pattern clearly. Tyler was rewarded for sounding like a leader. Maya was punished, softly and socially,